Welcome to the African Weekly Roundup, a weekly program every Sunday here on HORUFADHI Media where I discuss the latest news and events across the African continent. I'm Sultan Mohammed, your host and producer here on HORUFADHI Media. We hope you find this program very informative. Please like, share, and for similar content, do subscribe to HORUFADHI Media. Also, do subscribe to HORUFADHI Media Group's second channel, known as HORUFADHI TV. We are currently watching this program and where you can find other exclusive programs such as Behind the Scenes and Mahahi Salah, among others. And last but not least, do follow myself, Sultan Mohammed, Suleiman Hashi, Yasin Abdi, and the wider HORUFADHI Media team on our social media platforms that should appear on the screen any moment. Let's get straight into the news. We start off in Uganda, where the Ugandan government said on Sunday its Ebola caseload had jumped to 16 people, while a further 18 people also likely had the disease, fueling fears of a spreading outbreak that involves a strain for which a vaccine has not yet been found. In a tweet, the Ugandan Ministry of Health also said the death toll of confirmed cases remained 4, while 17 others classified as probable cases had also died. The outbreak had also now spread to 3 districts, all in central Uganda. The East African country last week announced the outbreak of Ebola. A 24-year-old man in Uganda's central Mubende district showed symptoms and later died. Doctors said the patient with the confirmed case had high fever, diarrhea, and abdominal pains and was vomiting blood. He had initially been treated for malaria. The World Health Organization said there had been 7 previous outbreaks of Ebola Sudan strain, 4 in Uganda and 3 in Sudan. It said Uganda last reported an outbreak of Ebola Sudan strain in 2012 and an outbreak of Ebola Zaire strain in 2019. The World Health Organization said ring vaccination of high-risk people with a available vaccine had been highly effective in controlling the spread of Ebola in recent outbreaks in the Democratic Republic of Congo and elsewhere, but that this vaccine had only been approved to protect against the Zaire strain. Another vaccine produced by Johnson & Johnson may be effective, but has yet to be specifically tested against the Sudan strain, it added. The current outbreak attributed to the Ebola Sudan strain appears to have started in a village in the Mubende district around the beginning of September, authorities have said. The World Health Organization says Ebola Sudan strain is less transmissible and has shown a lower fatality rate in the previous outbreaks than comparison to the Ebola Zaire strain, a strain that killed nearly 2,300 people in the 2018 to 2020 epidemic in neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. Now over to Somalia, where at least 15 Somali soldiers were killed and 6 others injured in the capital on Sunday when a suicide bomber blew himself up at a military recruitment center. Somalia's Al-Qaeda allied group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the bombing. It's reported that a suicide bomber had disguised himself as a regular soldier recruit and joined others as they filed into a military base early Sunday before he detonated the explosive. Now Al-Shabaab has claimed that they have killed 32 soldiers and 40 others being injured in the base in Mogadishu, and this hasn't been confirmed by the Somali government. This comes at a time where the Somali armed forces alongside local clan militia known as Ma'awisli have been continuing an ongoing offensive in central Somali regions of Hiran and Galgudud, where dozens of militants have been killed and dozens of towns have been liberated as Al-Shabaab is currently on a back foot. This morning, reports emerged that SNA forces had support from Turkish Bayraktar TB2 drones when they liberated a town in Hiran region this morning. Now, staying in Somalia, Somalia's breakaway region of Somaliland announced it will postpone its scheduled presidential election to next year rather than holding it in November when the incumbent president term ends, the regional electoral body said on Saturday. In August, deadly protests broke out in the region with the demonstrators demanding elections be held in November amid suspicions President Musa Bihi wanted to delay the poll and extend his term. In these clashes between security forces and opposition protesters, at least 5 people were killed and 100 were injured, which was the region's most deadliest clash in a decade. Opposition politicians and human rights groups both condemned the police brutality against civilian protesters by the Bihi administration. Now over to Angola, where thousands of Angolans protested on Saturday against what they said was a flawed election last month that returned the ruling MPLA to power after nearly 5 decades of uninterrupted rule. Angola's constitutional court threw out a complaint filed by the runner-up opposition party UNITA in the August 24th election. Now, UNITA, a former rebel group who fought the ruling People's Movement for Liberation of Angola, or MPLA, for nearly 3 decades, received many of its votes from youths who felt left out of the country's oil riches. After the country's most closely fought election, the Electoral Commission declared the People's Movement for Liberation of Angola the winner, prolonging its nearly 5 decades of uninterrupted rule and handing President João Lourenço a second term. Just over 51% of voters had supported the ex-Marxist MPLA, it said. The National Union for Total Independence of Angola, or UNITA, its longtime opponent and former civil war enemy, took about 44%, its best result on record according to the commission. Now, UNITA's leader Adalberto Costa Jr. rejected the results, citing discrepancies between the commission's count and the party's own tally. He accused the Electoral Commission, which mostly is controlled by the MPLA, of fraud. Now, many protesters were among the young and unemployed who felt failed by the MPLA, some of whose members became billionaires from Angola's oil wealth, while most live in poverty. Now, demonstrators took over Independence Square, traditionally where the MPLA holds rallies and victory parties. They were peaceful, although analysts fear there is enough anger and youth frustration for any protest to quickly turn violent. Now, UNITA officials have not officially published any evidence of their claims of electoral fraud. Now over to Mali, where during his UN speech in New York, Mali's military-appointed Prime Minister lashed out at France and the United Nations in a grievance-filled address over his nation's deteriorating security situation, while praising the exemplary cooperation, he said, with Russia. Now addressing the 77th session of the UN General Assembly on Saturday, Abdoulaye Magai slammed what he called France's, and I quote, unilateral decision to relocate its remaining troops to neighboring Niger amid deteriorating relations with Mali's two-time coup leader Assimi Goïta. Now, the Malian Prime Minister also offered a grim assessment of the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali, while openly praising the exemplary and fruitful cooperation between Mali and Russia and the influence of mercenaries from the Wagner Group. He said, "We must recognize that nearly 10 years after its establishment," the Prime Minister said, "the objectives for which the UN mission was deployed in Mali have not been achieved," the Prime Minister elaborated. "This is despite numerous Security Council resolutions," he said. Now, France intervened militarily in Mali in 2013, leading an effort to remove armed groups from the control of the northern Malian towns they had overtaken. Now, over the past 9 years, Paris had continued its presence in a bid to stabilize the country amid repeated attacks by the armed groups, according to the French government. Now, the French departure in August raised new concerns about whether those fighters will regain territory, with security responsibilities now falling to the Malian military and UN peacekeepers. Now, the Wagner Group, a Russian network providing fighters for hire, has been allowed to operate in Mali despite evidence collected by the UN pointing to their involvement in mass summary executions, arbitrary detentions, torture, and forced disappearances in the Central African Republic. Now, staying in West Africa, the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, has announced more sanctions on Guinea's military government after it failed to establish a new schedule for a transition to democracy. In an extraordinary summit held on Thursday on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, leaders from West Africa's main political and economic bloc agreed to freeze military government members' financial assets and bar them from traveling to other countries in the region. The regional bloc also gave Guinea until October 22nd to establish a reasonable timetable or face additional sanctions. Now, Guinea has been ruled by the military since a coup in September 2021 removed President Alpha Condé, who had held power since 2010. Now, Guinea's military-appointed Prime Minister Bernard Goumou earlier slammed ECOWAS's chief Umaro Embalo, describing him as a puppet wearing the mantle of a statesman. The ECOWAS Development Bank said in a statement that it would suspend financing to Guinean development projects as part of the new sanctions. The bank currently supports at least 2 energy projects in the country. ECOWAS first sanctioned Guinea's military rulers and their families in the days following the September 2021 coup. Interim President Mamadi Doumbouya proposed a 3-year transition scheduled in May, which ECOWAS rejected in early July. They said the military rulers would face additional sanctions if no date were set by the beginning of August. That is all the top stories here on the African Weekly Roundup. Please tune in next week for our weekly updates on events across the African continent.